And I think you can see me. I can get some confirmation from our chat. Um, but my name is Amanda. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Senior Manager of Education Programs at Steppenwolf Education. I'm so excited to see our teachers, teaching artists, and arts educators here to join us today for our first virtual teacher workshop. Before we get started, I wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. And even though we're all in different places right now, we want to recognize that Steppenwolf Theater and all the places that we're coming from today sit on native land. Steppenwolf specifically resides on the traditional homelands of the people of the Council of the Three Fires, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa. Although for over 200 years, Native nations have been forcibly removed from this territory, we must acknowledge that this land continues to be a site of gathering and healing for more than a dozen other tribal nations and remains home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois. Right now, a bee who works in StepEd is going to, in the chat, put a link that can tell you more about the land that you're on. Thank you so much, Abi, and thanks for gathering that land acknowledgement as a way to kick things off today. So StepEd is really exciting to figure out ways to take our pedagogy, aesthetic education, and transfer that into workshops that can have two purposes. One, art makers you are as teachers, and so we want to give you an opportunity to be creative and to make and be a learner, but also have a lesson that you can bring back to your students or tools that you can bring back to your students. So today we hope that you'll give yourselves permissions to be learners and art makers, and know that we will follow up with all of the materials and tools that we employ today. So you don't have to worry about capturing all of that. We are on a Zoom webinar, so there are a couple logistical things that I want to kind of get us used to as we engage in this workshop. Myself and Greg, we are the hosts today, so we're the only people that you can see and hear. We have other members of the Steppenwolf education team that are helping us facilitate behind the scenes, but you can't see or hear them right now. Everybody should see the chat function in one of their windows. And so if you see that chat function, write maybe your first name and what school you're from, or your pronouns, or something to introduce yourself as a way of practicing, and you can make it to all panelists and attendees. And that'll give us an idea of who is out here today. I will write that I am Amanda from StepEd so that you can see. Yeah.
Amanda, just seems like we're getting information that the chat function seems to be disabled.
Oh no.
Would you mind checking on your end? There should be like a 3 dots near the chat with more like options, and just make sure that the chat function is enabled.
Yeah, I think what I'll do, Abi, is I'm going to make you a co-host. And
Great.
So if you could figure that out, that would be great.
Awesome.
There's also oh, I see, chat seems to be disabled. Thank you so much. There's also a Q&A at the bottom. That's a place that if you have really specific questions for the team, or I guess noticings about the chat being disabled, that's a great place to put it. But since you are educators, we wanted to make sure that if you have really specific questions about our pedagogy, about the content, about resources, that's something that we're going to leave time for at the end of today's workshop for you to ask. But as we're going through, just like good teaching artists, we definitely want to make sure to be responding. Oh, it looks like our chat is working again. Thank you so much. So now if you want to throw in there, yes,
there
your
we go.
name,
yeah.
this is so great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Abi, for fixing that. I really appreciate it. Lastly, there's kind of a raise hand function. And that raise hand function, you'll see is just like a little hand like this. And there might be moments that Greg asks you to use these different tools. So in the chat, feel like you can throw a question. Raise your hand if you need a little bit more time. So everybody, do you see that little raise hand button? Let's see people hit that and the numbers go up. Oh yes, 10, 16, 20, love it. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got our raising hands, our chat, and our Q&A. I love it. Thank you all so much for learning how to use those tools alongside us. I am going to stop talking and hand this over to a wonderful teaching artist who has worked with StepEd for a really long time, artist and arts educator, Greg Geffrard. You can introduce yourself better than I, but I am going to spotlight you, hide myself, and support you in this wonderful workshop that you've created today.
Nice. Ooh, that's my face. Good morning. It's still morning, actually, for all of us. Good morning to you all. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Greg Geffrard. I use he, him, his pronouns. I have been a teaching artist with Steppenwolf for 5 years. This is my 5th year, which, ooh, time, it flies so quickly. I am also an actor, a poet in the Chicago community. I have been writing poetry since I was in about the 4th grade. Nothing that I'm really proud of really until about 10 years ago. I met a poet named Idris Goodwin while I was at the University of Iowa in grad school. And he's the one that helped kind of help refocus me. Meeting him and also Steve Sapp and several individuals from a group called Universes, who you should definitely check out if you get the opportunity. They do such amazing theater work. So yeah, I've always really enjoyed writing for quite some time, and specifically when I moved here to Chicago is when I got more into activist work, primarily paired off with a wonderful woman named Christiana Ray Colon. And so that's when I really started digging into what this work of poetry could actually do, and the life of activism found specifically within poetry, because it does give voice to the voiceless and helps to amplify those who don't tend to get heard often. And this is what I truly enjoy doing. For the last, for about 3.5 years, I also did sexual assault prevention education work. And so I am big into helping those who are dehumanized and amplifying their voices. And more important than anything, the idea of radical joy. Specifically in these times, we don't tend to allot ourselves to find pockets of happiness. I mean, I know many of us, or almost all of us, are quarantined in one way or another, probably by ourselves, or if we're fortunate enough, we're there with somebody else. But in this time, I thought it'd be nice to slow down a little bit and just kind of delve into some poetry and see what we find.
Greg, I just want to say one more thing, kind of lift up what you're talking about as we start to segue into the lesson. Steppenwolf education uses aesthetic education as a approach to our pedagogy, and a B is going to throw 2 links in the chat if you want to read more about aesthetic education. But as we go through these teacher workshops, it's something that we will lift up and highlight, since we know that you'll have a meta lens on everything. And then I did forget to say that this is being recorded so that we can archive it and have it available, especially the lesson. And so there might be parts where Greg asks people to share out, but if you don't want your voice on that recording, it's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure that people knew that for today. Thanks, Greg.
All right, thank you, Amanda. Let's make sure that cool. Yes, as Amanda says, this is a workshop for teachers. So there are going to be parts where I'm a lot more transparent and about what it is exactly that I'm doing, because I know most of you are coming in here just so you can probably pick up how to put together a lesson plan of your own, whether you're using this or utilizing other poetry. So know that I will be speaking. I will let you know when I'm just I'm speaking as an educator, or if I'm just completely flipped to the other side and just from from teaching artist to teacher, just like, do you have any questions and how do we best navigate around that? So just wanted to let you know that up front. Let me look at my other notes. Cool. Make yourself, yeah, as Amanda said, I will make myself available for answers for Q&A at the end of all of this, so worry not if you have anything. But if you have anything whilst we're going that you want answered in the moment, please just drop it in the Q&A, and we will do our best to answer it as we move along the lesson plan. Cool. Final thing I will say, and this actually will launch us into the first part of this, which we're going to jump into a warm-up at the top. So we're going to be delving into a poem by Erika Sánchez entitled 43. It deals with a lot of trauma and violence, and specifically speaking about violence enacted on teachers. These individuals, these 43 individuals that were disappeared in 2014. So know that I am well aware that unfortunately not many of us have the opportunity to walk away from trauma or know how to zip ourselves back up after engaging in something that is really traumatic. So know that I have allotted spaces within this lesson to take a cleansing breath, or if you at any point need to just like walk away for a little bit, please do what it is that you need to for yourself to take care of yourself, because you know yourself better than I do. Know that I'm not simply bringing this work just so we can explore the traumatic, but celebrate the being able to survive and reflect upon the unfortunate tragedies that fall upon certain people in our populace. So with that being said, I'm going to start off, ask us to start off by doing a breathing warm-up. And so we're going to do 5 cleansing breaths. So we're going to, it's just going to build as it goes. So we're going to breathe in for 3 seconds, hold at the top for 3 seconds, and then release. Exhale for 3 seconds, and then hold for 3 seconds. And then we're going to build up to 4. And we'll do breathing in and out to a 4 count. And then the final 2 will be breathing in and out to a 5 count. So the first one will be 3 on a 3 count. The next 2 will be on a 4 count. And then the final 2 will be on a 5 count. Hopefully that makes sense. Amanda is going to be playing some music whilst we do this. If you feel comfortable, just close your eyes. Just listen to the sound of my voice. I will guide us through this. Okay. Okay. Well, let's get ourselves started. We're listening to some Erika Satie. Erika Sánchez says that she likes to listen to him when she's writing and such. So I thought that we would try to delve into her world a little bit before diving into her work. Here we go. All right, just breathe in, just let a breath in and a breath out just to empty out our bodies completely before we get ourselves started. So breathing in and out. Let's begin. So we're gonna breathe in for 3 count. So breathe in, 1, 2, 3, hold, 1, 2, 3, exhale, 1, 2, 3, hold, 1, 2, 3. Now we're gonna go on a 4 count. So breathing in, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathing in, I'm going on a 5. So breathing in on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, final 1, breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. All right, cool. Do whatever it is you need to do. Any additional things you need to do. Maybe you need to stretch a little bit, shake some things out. Maybe you need to just catch a breath at your own pace. Please feel free to do that. I apologize if the sound was a little choppy. I know that I was speaking while the music was playing, so I apologize if it didn't give you the feeling of relaxation that we were hoping and connecting. But yes.
And Greg, really fast,
Yes.
I did want to note for people, since everybody on this call has different levels of knowledge with our department, that we picked an Erika Sánchez poem because StepEd's last production was I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, which is based on the young adult novel by Erika Sánchez. It was adapted by Isaac Gomez. And we wanted to do a lesson today that was adjacent to that work, but wasn't you didn't necessarily have to have read that play, that book, or seen that play to participate. So just to interject that quickly.
No, I greatly appreciate it. Yes. So we're going to be diving into Erika Sanchez's work. But before we do, I wanted to give a little bit of front loading, a little bit of context about what the poem is about itself. We're going to listen to an interview, NPR interview. And while we listen to the NPR interview, I know some of us are more visual than audio learners. Yes. So apologize, English, not my first language. What I'm going to do is while we listen to the NPR interview about what happened, what the events are that helped to inspire Erika to write this poem, we're going to also put the information up on the screen in bullet points. It is not a transcript of the interview itself, but it's just the bullet points of the information, just in case you are somebody who would rather follow along with your eyes instead of just like hearing what is happening. So we're going to listen to a quick 7-minute interview that kind of gives context, and then we will reconvene, and I will be muting myself, and here we are. Thank you, Amanda.
On September 26, 2014, students from a teacher training school in rural southern Mexico commandeered some buses. Their ultimate destination was Mexico City for a demonstration. But those buses never arrived, and 43 of the students went missing along the way and were presumed killed in and around the town of Iguala. Although their remains have never been found, their deaths were variously blamed on corrupt local political and police officials, as well as higher-ups in the Mexican military and the government, and of course, the drug gangs. The aftermath sent Mexico into a political crisis amid shifting explanations and inconclusive investigations. Now, Mexican journalist Anabel Hernandez has published an exhaustive look into the events of that night. Her book is called A Massacre in Mexico, the true story behind the missing 43 students. She told us the official version of the events was a fabrication.
In this official version, the Mexican government said that the army and the federal police, they didn't know anything about what was happening, and they just get notice 2 or 3 hours after everything ends. This is the official story. What I have been in all these years, 4 years of investigation, is that all this official version is a lie. It's not true.
It's a lie. So tell us what you uncovered. I mean, the big question is, of course, who attacked these students and why they were attacked.
What I discovered was that the army and the federal police not just were noticed about what was happening that night, every minute.
So they knew, the federal government and the police.
Not just this, even more. I have reports, official reports, that proves that the Army and the federal police were chasing the students since they left the school, 3 hours before the attack.
So the federal police and the Army were chasing the students. How were the students killed?
Well, the students arrived near Iguala. The Army, the federal police, the state police were waiting for them. Then the students decide to move the 2 buses where they were transporting inside to the city to be able to take 3 more buses. Mm-hmm. The objective was take more buses to go to the protest to Mexico City. So they went to bus station, they took the other 3 buses, and when the students were trying to escape on board of these 5 buses from Iguala, when the Army, the federal police, the municipal police, and the state police start to shoot against the buses to stop them. Mm-hmm. The objective of the attack were 2 buses. From these 2 buses disappeared all the 43 students. So the federal police opened fire, people were wounded, injured, and 2 of the buses, the people that were on those buses, the students that were on those buses disappeared. Why were they targeting this group of students? Why would the federal police and the Army get involved in this? This was, I think, the most difficult part of my investigation.
Of course.
Why, if the students were traveling in 5 buses, why the target was just 2? And also, these 2 buses were exactly the 2 buses that the Army and the federal police start to monitor it since 3 hours before. These 2 buses were the 2 buses where the students were traveling from the school to Iguala. Why? So what I was able to find is that in these 2 buses were inside in a secret parts of the bus.
A secret compartment?
Yes, heroin, 2 million of heroin.
$2 million worth of heroin.
They didn't know it. The students didn't know it. But the Army and the federal police, they knew it.
So these students were almost victims of circumstance. They had taken and commandeered 2 buses that were being used by drug dealers to transport drugs, and they didn't know it. This
was a really tragic accident. They didn't know it.
How do you know that heroin was hidden on that bus?
I was able to connect with one drug lord, important drug lord. I was able to contact with one person that works for him and was this informant inside the cartel that explained me this.
Do we know who ordered the crime? There's been over 100 arrests in this case. Do we know who actually said, targeted these students and ordered this to happen?
According with my investigation, the first responsible of this crime was the 27th Battalion in Iguala. In particular, the colonel that received the phone call from the drug lord ordering him, "You have to rescue my drugs. I pay you for this. I don't know what you have to do. I want my drugs back."
Have they faced any consequences? What have they said to your findings?
Even now, the Mexican government is denying in all the ways possible that the Army, they were present. The real persons that were involved on that crime are not in jail. And I think if we are able to understand, if we are able to send to these people to jail, maybe we will be able to stop all these abuses of power and human rights violations.
You have been an investigative journalist for many years. It is an incredibly dangerous profession. We've seen so many journalists in Mexico killed. You are now living in Italy for your own safety. You have received threats. Are you worried about what this will mean for you and your family?
I published this book on 2016
In Mexico,
in Spanish, and the first consequences were terrible. I received threats immediately. I have to say that the wife of one of the persons disappeared. And in the middle of my investigation, one of my sources were murdered just in the streets. But I think that this is my job, and I'm convinced that if I put some light in this darkness, it's more important than my own safety.
Anabel Hernández's new book is called A Massacre in Mexico. Muchísimas gracias.
Right. Thank you. Thank you all so much for listening to that. If we could just take the next couple of seconds just to do a couple of cleansing breaths. I'm just going to, for me, please follow along if you would like. Just going to do just 2 cleansing breaths at a 4 count. So just breathing in and breathing out, just letting all the air out of your body. And then breathing in on a 4 count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4. Thank you. I know that I'm definitely left with thinking about the responsibility or the burden that is placed upon historians, especially those who are wanting to make sure that the stories are told correctly, and that people and their histories aren't erased, and those brave individuals. I just want to take a moment just to acknowledge and thank those individuals for the work that they do, because we're able to get that information, and Erika was able to get that information. She was also able to create this wonderful piece of art that we're going to delve into today. Before we jump in, I would say if there's anything that is unclear when Erika reads the poem or anything like that, please feel free to drop it into the Q&A. But I would also encourage us to be comfortable with living in some ambiguity, and making not trying to make sure that we fully understand everything that is happening, because I find specifically when it comes to art, the wonderful thing is we have a way into the art that feels really, really personal to us. We're able to inject, bring our full selves to that art. But one thing that I am constantly learning on a daily basis is not all art is meant for me. And the things that I don't understand, they may be there purposely because they're not originally meant for me. But I could still appreciate the fact that it exists, and be excited about the fact that there's a very specific fraction of our population that this art is made for, and how important that is, to be able to see themselves and exclusively themselves in that art. So with that being said, we're going to delve into the poem itself. So this is Erika Sánchez actually reading the poem off of she did a podcast it's a podcast called Verses, that is put on by the Poetry Foundation here in Chicago. It's hosted by Dinesh Smith and Franny Cho, who are amazing poets in their own right. Love them oh so much. And so they did an interview with her for the podcast. So she's going to be reading the poem, And then, so we'll have the poem up on the screen for you to follow along. But after she reads the poem, they continue to converse with her. And I wanted us to kind of hear the second half of this conversation. And so we'll be also throwing the transcript of that up after the poem is up. And then afterwards, we'll put, I'll be back so we can continue this conversation. Before we put the poem up, I will show you where the cover of the book, the name of the book of poetry by Erika is called Lessons on Expulsion. And actually the book of poetry came out the same year as I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. And so I've always seen them and felt that they were kind of in tandem with each other. And so with that being said, we're going to hear Erika Sánchez read this poem and then listen to a little bit of an interview with her before we jump into our art making.
Could you read us the poem that you were going to read us today?
So this poem is titled 43, and it's about the students in Mexico who were quote unquote disappeared in 2014. I mean, everyone knows that they were murdered and the government was behind it. And so it still hasn't been resolved because who cares about poor brown kids? And so it's something that's been haunting me for the last few years. The fact that 43 young people could just disappear and no one knows where they are. They can't even find the bodies. Or what they think are the bodies are other bodies.
Yeah.
So it's just like grave after grave. It's horrific. Anyway, so that's what the poem is about. 43. The moment before death, the air inexplicably tastes of wet horse. The chest expands and something unspools like wet vines. In this land of child brides and teenage assassins, a bus full of students dissolves into the mountain mist. A retinue of beheaded journalists mouth clues while the young president delivers platitudes. But what do they matter? The students don't know the kilos of heroin stored below them. A boy of 18, eyes gray as bathwater, charts a man's face under his black mask. Why even bother, the boy wonders. The night's only witnesses, the stars, an ocelot, a single strand of hair caught in a barbed wire. Even the sopilotes won't eat the glut of the insatiable. The bloodbirds hiss and grunt while a man with pointed teeth whistles a love song. Why waste time with metaphors? The body is kindling. The body is a plastic bouquet shriveled at a crossing. The trees bow and weep, but everybody knows the rain revises nothing. The charred bones belong to no one. Beyond the verdant mountain, a caravan of mothers and fathers beg a cankered country for the locus of cruelty. Farther, a troop of camouflaged men burn fields of red poppies, those lovely flowers of happiness and squalor.
That poem is gorgeous.
That is.
Thank you so much.
I was so struck by that line, why waste time? Is it why waste time with metaphor?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that in that line?
That sometimes it's exhausting to create metaphors for things that are horrific. Sometimes something is so awful.
You know, it pulls me back to what we were kind of saying earlier about making medicine out of poison, right? This is a hard poem, but it's still like gorgeous to look at, right? And like I think that's only something that like poetry or like literature can do. You know, I've seen pieces about Black Death that are beautiful art, you know, but still do the hard work of making me remember the thing and like still do a thing of like honoring the like pain and violence that was like witnessed there, right?
Yeah, there's a difference between sort of a beautiful thing that speaks to the horror while like still giving you something to, you know, like I feel like there's
that offers something, because I think the other thing, the pretty thing, is actually just violence begetting more violence.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It erases what happened in a way.
Yeah. Or even, just the like relentless forcing somebody to relive it is without giving you anything in return. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like there's some art that is just interested in like taking from whoever is interacting with it. And
it can't be all darkness, I don't think.
Yeah. No. And I don't think this poem is. I think this poem like has a deep relationship with that darkness, but isn't only that,
Thank you.
Yeah.
You guys are such great readers.
Thank you. You deposit, Amanda. Thank you so much. So we're going to dive into the art making itself. So where I got the idea of where the idea for this came from, this specific exercise comes from this lovely book called Underneath. Boom, 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 boom. So I am somebody who also teaches spoken word poetry, and I'm always looking for different ways to engage my students specifically into writing new works, and work that is personal, but at the same time making sure to leave space for themselves to not feel burdened or feel like they have to share their most painful stories in front of because I usually teach students and prepare students for Louder Than a Bomb competition, which is the largest youth spoken word poetry competition in the world. And so I'm constantly thinking about how can we best make sure that specifically these young people are sharing their best work, but at the same time not completely and utterly exposing themselves and leaving themselves completely vulnerable in a room just so they can get more points and win a competition. And so this is an exercise called digging. And we're gonna have a quote up from Ben Cass and Jeff Cass and Scott Beal. I'm gonna put that up on the screen, and then we're also going to go through what the steps of the exercise is. Just make sure for this next part, just make sure you have some type of writing utensil. Whether you can also just like type it up on your computer, and then at the other side of this, we will then ask if anybody wants to share out 3 lines or so. So here's the quote from Jeff Cass. Oh, that was supposed to be Scott. I apologize, Scott. Writing is like archaeology, where most people might see an empty field, a stretch of barren desert. Archaeologists see a world of meaning, a world of stories under the surface. Instead of walking past the empty field, the stretch of desert, they stop. They look around and examine the environment. They pay attention, then they pull out their shovels and start digging. That's what writers do too. They slow down the world. They take a second look and a third. They dig and uncover. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a technique called unlayering. So we're going to be looking at one part and allow that to be our starting point for creating what is called an unlayering or an undigging poem. I actually wrote one inspired by 43 itself, the name of the poem. So we're going to start with an image or a noun from 43. You will start with underneath this is that. My example that I have here, the line that really stuck out to me is the rain washes away. The rain doesn't revise anything, and so I started with the rain. And so I had underneath the rain are the answers. Overdue and underdue, the answers that have been washed away, from skin peppered the color irrelevant. Forgotten by those who chose not to acknowledge us in the first place. Underneath the forgotten names, underneath the forgotten are the names. Stammering clumsily off their parents' lips and heart, fighting against historical erasure. So what we're going to be doing is utilizing the poem. You're going to use a noun or an image from there and have that be your first. Underneath this is blank. And so what you're trying to do is actually shrink the world, but dive deeper into it. As opposed to thinking, I have to connect with all the things out here. What we're trying to do is slow down and observe something and then kind of break it down and see what's underneath that and what's underneath that layer and what's underneath that layer. And allowing our senses to be the thing that leads us through this exercise. So what you're going to be doing, and if you can go to the next slide, Amanda. So what we're going to be doing is utilizing underneath the blank 12 times, making sure that we're allowing our senses to be what leads us through this exercise. The goal here is, yes, you're going to be creating work, but you're not necessarily thinking about, I'm going to have something completely and utterly complete by the end of this. This is a lesson that actually I usually teach in 2 separate lessons. We condensed it together because of the fact that we only have a 50-minute class, but know that this is something that you can actually break up into 2 lessons, so you can make sure you do all your front loading on one end, and then you can do the activity and the exercise on the other end. So this doesn't have to feel like something that is completely and utterly condensed into a short amount of time. On top of that, make sure that you're diving deeper into your metaphors and not staying on the surface, pun intended. So it's like, instead of like, underneath my heart is anger, like try to expand on the imagery itself. So like, underneath my heart is a house filled with doors that slam so hard they shake the walls. Granted, yes, this is probably going to make stretch out the work, but I'm a big fan of like, write more than you need to and then shrink it or edit later, but just try to get as much out as you possibly can. So just to go through those again, we're writing 12 underneaths, utilizing one noun or imagery from the poem itself, and allow it to completely and utterly run with, like, let your imagination be as expansive as you would like it to be. But you're only utilizing underneath the concept of underneath the blank only 12 times. That's the most you want to use it. You can use it a lot less than that because of the time that is allotted. And make sure that, and if you are having difficulty finding a starting point for yourself, you can either use mine or think about using something that's physically tangible that's in the poem, whether it's like the red poppies, the bus full of students, the expanding chest, the barbed wire, the black mass. Or if you want to get much more simpler than that, you can start with colors, like underneath the red or underneath the gray are places that you can start. I've done that teacher thing where I've talked too much, so I'm going to stop talking. So the next 10 minutes are yours to write, and then at the end, we will ask individuals to share out. Final thing is we're going to be playing some music underneath this, so please enjoy the music. If you're not about the music, then just turn your volume down. I'll make sure to wave you down and let you know how much time we have left as we move along this lesson. Please enjoy your 10 minutes of writing. Music. All right, folks, just want to let you know we have about 5 minutes left. Whilst you are in the process of writing, a couple of things for you to think about. Think about specifically what senses you find yourself heavily utilizing. Do you find yourself utilizing more sense of sight, more smell? And if you find yourself heavily leaning on one sense, see if you can gravitate towards the other senses, the senses that aren't being utilized as much. Don't forget about like touch, specifically when we're writing. We can very quickly think about like, what can we smell, what can we see, what can we hear. So see, and what can we taste. So see if you can see where are the places that you can lean into the other senses that you're not fully utilizing on this. Okay. Cool. I will come back and let y'all know when you have about 3 minutes. I'm ready. All right. So if you can, by a show of hands, if anybody would love to share anything, please raise your hand. I will ask if anybody wants to share about like 3 lines of what they wrote. We'll be sure to go in and unmute you so you can share. Just make sure you say what your first name is and what your pronouns are, and we'll look forward to that. Oh, we have a hand raised. I don't know if it's I or Amanda who's controlling this though.
Hello, this is Ahon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm Ahon, he, him, his. I'm in Iowa. Yay.
Yeah, Iowa.
I have some words which I can share. Underneath the chest lies a rhythmic, comforting throb. Underneath the face is where you hide all that you want to show. Underneath the heroin will you find the strength that you gave up on so quickly. Underneath the wire was where our hands felt at home once. Underneath the waist will you find the stench of the effort I put into us. Underneath the mist is where I long to lose my path. Underneath the vines is where I will always cherish as our first time. Underneath the stars is where I wish we would meet 6 years back, but take a different path this time.
Thank you so much for that. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Does anybody else want to share out? That was so dope. Anybody else want to share out? Just raise your hand and we'll make sure to get you.
Molly, you should be good.
Hello, hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
I'm Molly. Use she, her, hers. I am our group sales coordinator with Steppenwolf, but I wanted to understand what our teachers were experiencing so I could hopefully share out to other teachers as these continue forward. So this was super inspiring and fun. I'll just pick a few of the ones I did. Let's see. Underneath the child brides are strong-ass women, women who will take over the world. underneath the metaphors are all the feelings you have been suppressing since you were a child, ready to come up and be felt and then released. Underneath the barbed wire is my grandmother's blue silk scarf blowing in the wind. And underneath the gray bathwater is a clear stream running through the mountains, bringing the snow to the ocean.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Molly. Glad you decided to jump in. That's amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Hi, I am Madeline, pronouns they, them, theirs. And I found myself really drawn to the physical words of body. So the 3 lines I first wrote were, beneath the bones is a heart too tired to keep beating. Beneath the body is a soul that wanders from plane to plane but finds no rest. Beneath the teeth is a gnawing, gaping hunger that claws up walls and wails in empty halls.
Awesome.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madeline. Dope. Thank you all so much for being here. I will let Amanda do all the wrapping up of this, but I just want to say thank you all so much for going on this adventure with me. This is something I just truly, truly enjoy doing, and to be able to do it with teachers too is an extra added bonus, because this is the first time I've been able to do that. So thank you all so much for your time and your patience with us as we navigate through all of this, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. And thanks for putting together such a thoughtful workshop today. What we wanted to do in terms of aesthetic education was take a really strong piece of source material, this historical event that isn't even that far in the past, that Erika Sánchez made art about, and then ourselves be inspired by that art to be art makers. And so hopefully that groundwork was scaffolded clearly for the group. Oh, thanks for all the thanks. But yeah, we're still here to, like I said, if you have questions that you want to directly ask Greg or the StepEd team, we're still on this call for the next couple minutes. And so if you raise your hand, Abi has been so great at navigating the technology and will unmute you so that you can talk to the team, and we'll hang out for a few moments.
Hello?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Hi, it's Janae. Actually, you did very good.
Oh, awesome.
I had a question. I'm a teacher at Chicago Public Schools, and the question was, the reason you're using underneath first, is that a way just to get the students thinking, or should we, or can we use a different word, or what was the reason for starting with underneath and then kind of finishing those thoughts with that word?
And you're muted, Greg, so unmute and then you can.
Probably be a lot easier for you to hear me if I unmute myself. Yes, that's an amazing question. I know specifically the reason they were using underneath was for them to, was a means of finding, of helping the students find a way to get into this. I know one of the things that they primarily want to focus on is stillness and spending time with an object. And so thinking about what this is and then what makes up the thing. And I think that's why they were thinking about underneath, because it's called unlayering or digging. If you find another active word to help that would help your students better navigate, then I would definitely encourage you to do that. But I know that was one of the primary reasons that they used underneath itself. Because also I think they were playing into that metaphor of what an archaeologist does. Like, what do you see that's there that other people do not?
Okay, got it. Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janae.
Thanks for your question.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, thanks, Greg. This was a great and also so different from anything that I've done before. So this was very cool and allowed me to get creatively going this morning. I had a question about like, how often are you having these sessions, and what are some other sessions that you're having, just to like get an idea of what's going on?
I might, yeah.
Yes. I'm like, Amanda would probably be the best person to answer that one.
Yes. And so, and this will kind of lead me into a couple of follow-up things. So we are hoping to offer these once a week. And in the survey, we're asking teachers exactly what kind of content they're looking for. Also, and so that's something that we want to be a conversation, because we want to be here to be providing resources that are useful to you as artists, but also that you can bring back to your students. And so that feedback will be really valuable. And so right now we're thinking Thursdays at 11. If you have opinions about that, you can definitely leave that in the survey for us. We'd love to know when the best time is. And as online learning and all of that evolves, we know that that could also change for what people's availability is. I'm also going to have a B drop two things in the chat. One is that our Young Adult Council, which is our council of high school age teens, is recruiting right now. And so we'd love if you send to your students the application that's due May 1st. And so that application link will go into the chat. And it's a great way for teens to get a deeper view of the theater. We had a great teen workshop with a lot of the young adult councils as ambassadors to connecting people to it yesterday. But there's such a wonderful way for teens that are interested in theater or any aspect of it to get more involved. A B can, of course, speak more to that. If people have questions, you can field them to a B. And then there's also this hashtag Enough Plays Against Gun Violence initiative. It's another thing that you can get your teens or your students involved in. And so this is calling for submissions. 6th through 12th grade students write and submit 10-minute plays about gun violence. And then they will be selected to have a nationwide reading. It's a really exciting project. And I feel like if you follow this link that Abi will drop into the chat, and also, you know, the website kind of gives you all the guidelines, but I know that teachers might be looking for initiatives for their students to get involved in, and this is a really great one that we want to amplify to all of you. And so thank you all so much for taking this time with us today. Greg, thank you so much. B, your logistical support. Yeah, we will be back next Thursday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all so much. Have a great day.